He said his ex was a delicate princess who needed him. Now she's alone, broke, and still waiting for the inheritance that never came. I never thought a midlife crisis would hit my marriage like this. To everyone around us, David and I were the picture-perfect couple. He was the stable, successful, faithful husband. I was the wife who held everything together. Our home, our daughter, our life. We barely argued. David rarely went out unless it was some formal work dinner or a neighborhood event. If he finished work on time, he'd always come home for dinner. Weekends, family time, little road trips, nature walks, board games. He was there. Always. Compared to other guys in his circle, David was different. No gambling, no golfing that's actually bar hopping, no sketchy hobbies. The other wives in our social group used to say, "You're so lucky," and then try to guilt trip their own husbands with, "Why can't you be more like David?" I used to believe it too. David was a good husband, a solid father, the kind of man I thought I'd grow old with. Things between us weren't as passionate as they were in our 20s, of course, but it was comfortable, warm. He still kissed me on the forehead every morning before heading out, just a little habit that never faded, even after 16 years of marriage. He showed up at every parent-teacher conference. He never dumped work stress on the family. If he was upset, he kept it outside the door. That kind of self-control. Rare. We built this life brick by brick, and I was genuinely proud of what we had. So imagine my shock. Pure, chest-tightening, spoon falling into my bowl kind of shock. When one morning, while I was halfway through my oatmeal, David looked up from his coffee and said, "I think we should get a divorce." Just like that. I almost choked. For a moment, I thought he was joking. Maybe he'd lost a bet with one of his golf buddies. Maybe this was some weird social experiment he was testing. But no. His face was dead serious. I asked why, barely holding it together. We were fine, weren't we? Just a few days ago, we were planning our anniversary getaway. He'd even suggested asking his parents to watch our daughters so we could spend a few nights alone, just the two of us. And then he dropped the bomb. He'd reconnected with his high school sweetheart, Sophie. She was recently divorced, down on her luck, raising a kid alone. And now, according to him, helping her have a better life was something he thought about every day. "This is my chance to make it right," he said. I stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Right then and there, I realized. This wasn't just a midlife crisis. This was a full-blown, tear-down-your-whole-life kind of disaster. At first, I thought maybe he just needed time. Maybe the Sophie situation was just a temporary delusion, a nostalgia trap. So I stayed calm. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just asked him why. Really, why? He started explaining. The way his voice softened when he said her name. The way his lips curled up into this half-smile. It was like watching someone recall their first love in real time. She had a hard life after marriage, apparently. Her husband gambled away everything and left her in debt. Her father, her rock, died in a freak accident. She had no job, no real-life skills, no backup plan. Just her daughter and a string of unpaid bills. And here comes my husband, the White Knight. He told me, and I quote, "She was like a princess growing up. She's never had to suffer. Seeing her in worn-out heels broke my heart. I wanted to throw up." He painted this picture of her as some delicate, fragile flower who just needed saving. Meanwhile, what was I? The one who ran our household like clockwork, raised our daughter, supported his career, sacrificed years of my own ambitions. So I asked him, "And what about me? And Ellie?" He looked guilty, genuinely. He tried to wipe my tears and said he'd make sure we were financially okay, that he'd leave us everything, that he didn't need much, that we could keep the house, the savings, even his shares in the company. Oh, how generous. I asked him why he had to marry her. Why not just help her get a job, get on her feet? He said he tried, but she refused to accept anything unless she was his wife. Apparently, it made her feel more secure that way. Excuse me? She wouldn't take help unless she became my replacement. I lost it. I've always been the calm, level-headed one. But that day, I snapped. I called her what she was, a homewrecker. I asked him how a grown woman with a child could not know how to survive on her own. And worse, how she could be okay breaking up a family for her comfort. David tried to defend her, said it was all his idea, said she had refused at first. I didn't care. I told him flat out, I'm not divorcing you. This was the life I had poured myself into. This was the home I built. I wasn't going to hand it over so he could play savior to someone who couldn't even fill out a W-2 form. But the more I resisted, the more resolved he became. He moved out, moved her and her daughter into a luxury apartment under his name, got her a job, surprise, as his personal assistant. Same office, same schedule, always by his side. It was humiliating. Clients started to notice, friends whispered. Even other women at the spa began talking behind my back, pretending to feel bad while clearly enjoying the gossip. Still, I didn't budge. Then one day, our daughter, Ellie, came home from school looking pale. She sat at the dinner table, barely touched her food, and then looked me dead in the eye and said, "Mom, Dad didn't go on a business trip, did he?" I froze. She said she saw him that morning, dropping off another girl at her school. A new girl who had just transferred into her grade. And then later that day, he picked her up again, with Sophie. He was holding her waist, Ellie said. Then she asked me in the smallest voice I'd ever heard, "Does Dad want to be her dad now?" That night, she got a fever, a high one. At 2 a.m., I was carrying her into the ER, and she was burning up, delirious, whispering, "Mom, he'll come, right? Dad will come. He always comes when I'm sick." She didn't know I had called him. Multiple times. No answer. And I realized she wasn't the only one waiting on someone who wasn't coming back. The night at the ER changed something in me. Ellie was lying there with an IV in her arm, cheeks flushed, murmuring in her sleep. I sat next to her, holding her little hand, silently cursing every decision that had brought us here. When she woke up sometime around 10 the next morning, she looked at me with those tired, teary eyes and said, "Mom, can we just let Dad go?" I didn't expect that. She was only 10. But in that moment, she was wiser than I'd been in months. I realized I had been holding on, not to David, but to a version of him that no longer existed. The David who kissed me on the forehead every morning was gone. The David who ran home to us every night. He wasn't coming back. And if he did come back, what kind of man would he be? Resentful, regretful, forced? No, thank you. So I picked up the phone and called his office. His assistant picked up, because of course he wasn't taking my calls anymore. I said flatly, "Tell David I'll sign the divorce papers." The divorce itself was oddly smooth. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was relief. Maybe it was the 5 seconds of clarity he had in the middle of his delusion. Either way, David gave me everything. The house, the cash, the cars, even 10% of his company stock. For Ellie, he said. I didn't argue. He kept the company and moved in with Sophie and her daughter. From what I heard, he even pulled some strings to get the girl into Ellie's school. He tried to make them a real family overnight. Meanwhile, I rebuilt. I had always helped with David's business in the early days. But after Ellie was born, I'd started a small creative agency with a college friend. It had been growing slowly, but I never had the time to fully commit. Now I did. Without the emotional weight of a failing marriage, I had energy again, real energy. I could focus. I could work late. I could take client meetings without worrying about dinner or PTA or walking on eggshells. I sold off a few extra properties we didn't need. Kept one near Ellie's school, one small condo downtown, and a cottage by the lake. I stopped scheduling holiday dinners for people I didn't care about. Stopped buying gifts out of obligation. Stopped pretending I was okay. I had money, I had my daughter, I had freedom. And for the first time in years, I had peace. You know that romantic idea some people cling to about the one that got away? The one you were meant to be with, but life got in the way? Yeah. Turns out sometimes they got away for a damn good reason. Not long after our divorce was finalized, I started hearing things. From mutual friends, from clients, from moms at school drop-off. Apparently, Sophie wasn't adjusting well to her new role as David's second act. She'd joined his company as his executive assistant, no less, and had quickly made her presence felt in all the wrong ways. One story still cracks me up. David had a big contract lined up with a powerful female investor. As part of the business retreat, they planned a spa weekend at this high-end mountain resort. Sophie insisted on coming along, as support, she said. The women split up for spa treatments, and Sophie was asked to entertain the investor while the men did their meetings. Harmless enough. Except, the first thing Sophie said to the investor after seeing her in a swimsuit was, "Wow, you're so brave to wear that. Have you ever considered cutting carbs? Let that sink in." David lost the deal the next day. The investor ghosted. No callbacks. Nothing. Later, I heard that during the spa visit, Sophie had mostly spent her time taking selfies in the hot tub and FaceTiming her daughter, completely ignoring the guests she was supposed to charm. And that was just one incident. I won't bore you with all the details, but let's just say she couldn't handle a calendar. She messed up invoices. She once spilled soup on an important signed contract because she was eating lunch on David's desk. At one point, David had her stop working altogether. From what I could gather, he just couldn't risk it anymore. But the real kicker? He couldn't leave her either. By then, they were living together. He'd pulled strings to get her daughter into Ellie's school. His pride wouldn't let him admit he'd chosen wrong. From the outside, I guess they still looked like a couple in love. But if you looked close, you could see it. The strain, the cracks. David looked tired, older, slower, and for someone who used to pride himself on self-control, he was starting to unravel. One day, our security guard at my apartment building pulled me aside. Said a man had been lurking around trying to follow me into the complex. When he was stopped, he claimed he was visiting someone but wouldn't say who. A few days later, the guard told me, "That guy bought a unit. Right above yours." I knew it before he even said the name. David. He'd moved into my building, above me, quietly, said he had insomnia. That seeing me, even from a distance, somehow helped him sleep. Creepy? Yes. Sad? Also yes. Predictable? Absolutely. He tried to play it off like it wasn't a big deal. Said he wouldn't bother me, that he just needed to be close. But I wasn't having it. "Move out, David," I told him. "We're done. You made your choice. I'm not going to be your emotional support pillow just because your dream girl turned out to be a nightmare." Months after David moved out of my building, I stopped hearing from him. No calls, no late-night rants, no awkward encounters in the hallway. It was bliss. Until one day his sister called. David had been diagnosed with advanced stomach cancer. He didn't tell me himself, of course not. Pride wouldn't allow it. But his sister wanted me to know, in case Ellie wanted to see him before things got worse. I told Ellie. She was quiet, thoughtful, then said she didn't want to visit. Not yet. I didn't push her. A few weeks later, David called me. His voice was thin, raspy. He didn't ask to come back. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He just talked about how tired he was, how everything had turned out differently than he expected, how Sophie wasn't quite who he thought she was, how he felt completely alone. He never said it directly, but I could tell. He wanted to come home, but I wasn't going to offer that. That ship had sailed. Sank, actually. We talked maybe 2 or 3 times after that, mostly about logistics. Things for Ellie's future, bank documents, medical insurance, and then he was gone, just like that. He did leave Sophie something. A decent condo, a lump sum. Not enough to live large, but enough to not fall apart. The bulk of his estate, stocks, investment properties, residuals from the business, went into a trust for Ellie, not directly to me, not out of guilt. Just responsibility, I guess. I didn't fight for more. I didn't want anything else from him. Sophie didn't contest the will. There was nothing scandalous in it. David had done everything by the book, but I know it burned her. She spent years thinking she'd won. that her patience, her suffering, her loyalty would eventually pay off. What she didn't realize was, you don't inherit a man's past just because you're there for his ending. You can't replace the foundation someone else helped him build. Now, Ellie's in college, thriving. I'm running my business full-time. It's growing faster than I ever imagined. My parents moved in with me. They help around the house, they cook, they keep things warm. And me? I've started painting again. I'm learning Italian. I take long walks alone, and I never have to explain where I've been. I'm not angry anymore, not sad, just free.